My name is Rena Kane. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was the luckiest daughter alive. Because I didn't just grow up on a family farm in Butterball, North Carolina. I kept it alive. The morning everything broke apart started like any other workday. Before sunrise, coffee half cold, truck already packed for a 3-day industry conference in Raleigh. I was halfway down Highway 264 when it hit me. The inheritance folder. The thick blue binder I never traveled without. Bank statements, trust paperwork, Grandpa's handwritten will notes, still sitting on my desk. I swore out loud, jerked the wheel, and whipped the truck around so hard the tires screamed. I told myself I'd be back in 5 minutes. Grabbed the folder, back on the road. Instead, I walked straight into the moment that changed my life. The house was too quiet. No radio, no kettle, no footsteps. Just the baby monitors sitting on the kitchen counter, still on from watching my nephew the night before. I froze, because through that static crackle, I heard my father's voice. Low, calm, certain. Sign it like this, and the bank won't notice. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would echo through the floorboards. I stood perfectly still. $2 million wired by Monday, Dad continued. Gambling debt gone. Lana gets his 50 grand to keep quiet. My mother's voice came next, thin, shaking. But, Rena, she's in Raleigh all week. Dad didn't hesitate. That's why we move fast. I hit record on my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. If you've ever had a moment where the world splits cleanly into before and after, this was mine. That recording captured 3 full minutes of betrayal, and nothing I did afterward was impulsive. It was survival. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand what this farm meant, and why losing it wasn't just about money. The Kane Turkey Farm didn't start with me. It started with my grandfather. 50 birds, 1 coop, and a mortgage he barely survived. By the time I was 12, Dad was teaching me how to spot the healthiest broad-breasted whites at auction, how to calculate feed ratios, how to read market shifts before the prices changed. Mom stitched our logo onto every employee's shirt at the kitchen table. Kane Turkey Farm, in thick red thread. My little brother Lana used to joke that I was the future boss, while he planned to manage vibes. We laughed. We didn't know what was coming. By my 20s, I wasn't just helping. I was running everything. 5 a.m. barn checks. Thermostats steady at 95 degrees for the pullets. 7 a.m. loading trucks. 200 birds headed to local restaurants. By 9, staff meetings in the equipment shed. Route sheets, feed schedules. Dad would lean against the tractor, nodding approval. Thanksgiving season nearly killed me every year. Extra flocks, grocery chain orders, community events, and still, I loved it. Because when I slid last year's financials across the dinner table, and Dad grinned and said, "My girl runs this better than I ever could," I believed him. I believed all of them. That belief shattered upstairs while I stood in my own kitchen, Dad explaining how he downloaded a signature replication app, how he scanned my old checks, how a notary owed him from a land swap in the 90s. Mom whispering doubts. Lana's cut already negotiated. They weren't panicking. They were executing. I backed away without making a sound, slipped into the office, grabbed my folder, dialed my phone loudly enough for them to hear. "Just checked into the hotel," I said casually. Traffic was awful. Dad's muffled reply floated down the hallway. Satisfied. I drove away with my inheritance folder on the passenger seat and a war starting in my chest. By the time I hit the interstate, I knew 3 things. I wasn't confronting anyone yet. I needed proof, not suspicion. Blood wouldn't protect me. Evidence would. I pulled over at a gas station 2 miles out of town. Hands shaking, I uploaded the recording to a private cloud drive. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Mira Mitchell, my college roommate turned forensic accountant. The second was to Mr. Lane, the family attorney who'd handled our trust for 20 years. Both answered immediately. Because when a woman who never panics says, "I need help now," people listen. By the time I reached Raleigh, this wasn't a family problem anymore. It was a legal one. And I was done being the obedient daughter holding everything together while everyone else planned to cash out. I didn't check into the conference hotel. Instead, I pulled into a run-down roadside motel just outside Raleigh. The kind with flickering neon and curtains that never quite close all the way. I paid cash, used a shortened version of my name, parked my truck where the camera over the office wouldn't catch the license plate. I wasn't hiding from strangers. I was hiding from my own family. Inside the room, I dropped my bag, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, replaying the recording again and again and again. Dad's voice never wavered. Mom's fear never stopped him. Lana never objected. Every replay stripped away another excuse I'd been clinging to. They didn't panic. They didn't hesitate. They planned. I opened my laptop. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about documentation. The first thing I did was log into the farm's security system. We installed the cameras last spring after a small theft, 50 birds missing overnight. At the time, Dad said it was overkill. Now, it felt like insurance I never knew I'd need. I rewound the feed to the previous evening. There he was, my father, walking into the equipment shed with his laptop case, printer humming under the fluorescent light. He laid out blank forms like a man setting a table for dinner. Mom hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, glancing back toward the house. I watched him scan my old checks, adjust brightness, overlay my signature. He practiced the stroke twice, then signed. My name. Perfect. I didn't cry. I took screenshots. Time-stamped, high resolution. Then I watched Lana arrive. He didn't even go inside the house. Dad met him halfway near the grain silo, handed him a thick envelope. Lana nodded once, shoved it into his jacket, and drove off. I sat back and exhaled. The escalation wasn't emotional. It was logistical. And that made it worse. Mira called at exactly 7:45 p.m. "Rena," she said quietly, "I'm seeing movement." She'd accessed the banking portal through credentials she still had from her last audit job. Dad had opened a new business account in Charlotte 3 weeks earlier. Small test transfers, $100 probes, routing numbers checked. He wasn't desperate. He was careful. Mom's maiden name appeared as a cosigner. Lana's student loan portal showed a payment posted that morning. Exactly $50,000. I stared at the screen. 6 weeks earlier, Lana had cornered me in the office asking for 20 grand to flip crypto. I said no. cited feed costs, equipment loans. He sulked for days. Now I understood why. Dad promised him more if he played along. That night, I didn't sleep. I exported video clips, labeled files, encrypted drives. Dad printing at 6:12 p.m., Mom witnessing at 6:18, Lana collecting at 9:47. Every action synced across devices. Undeniable. At 2:03 a.m., Mira emailed again. Subject line, overnight audit. Inside were spreadsheets mapping Dad's gambling losses, $400,000 over 18 months. Offshore servers, crop futures bets gone wrong, desperation masquerading as confidence. Mom had closed her retirement account early, penalties waived by a teller she knew from church. They weren't villains in a movie. They were people who made 1,000 small choices that led to one massive betrayal. The breaking point didn't come with yelling. It came with clarity. I saw the chain clearly now. Dad's addiction, Mom's fear of losing the house, Lana's silence for tuition money. And me? I was the asset, the clean credit, the trusted signature, the daughter who never questioned authority. At sunrise, I met Mr. Lane in his office. He didn't interrupt as I played the recording, didn't blink at the forged signatures, didn't defend them. When it ended, he folded his hands and said the words that finally shattered the last illusion I had left. This isn't a misunderstanding, Rena. This is fraud. He outlined the options calmly. Freeze the trust, lock the accounts, file suit. But timing mattered. If I moved too early, they'd pivot. Too late, the money would vanish. I needed leverage, and I already knew where to apply it. Every November, we hosted the Kane Turkey Bash. 60 neighbors, local officials, church members, everyone who believed in our story. Dad loved that stage, so I built mine above it. Back at the motel, I edited, layered audio, video, bank logs, timestamps. 5 minutes. Clean, brutal, irrefutable. Dad's voice explaining the forgery app. Mom questioning the trust clause. Lana demanding his cut. I added one final slide. Trust assets frozen, effective 9 a.m. Sunday. Mr. Lane confirmed the timing. Accounts would lock 1 hour before the event. No withdrawals, no damage control. Saturday night, I slept 3 hours. Sunday morning, I picked up a high-wattage Bluetooth speaker from a big box store. Paid with a prepaid card, no name. At dawn, I parked behind the equipment shed and climbed into the hayloft. I tested the sound. It echoed perfectly across the empty barn. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Accounts locked. At 10, guests arrived. Dad took the mic, thanked the community, smiled, and then I pressed play. The barn filled with truth, not shouted, not dramatized, just played. Voices bouncing off wooden beams, timestamps glowing red. Forks froze mid-air. Dad's face drained white. Mom collapsed against a table, sobbing. Lana ran. Mr. Lane stepped forward, documents raised, and I walked down the stairs, past people who had known me my whole life, and said calmly, "Effective today, the farm belongs to me, and it stays that way." That was the breaking point. Not because I exposed them, but because I stopped protecting them. The barn emptied faster than I expected. People didn't shout. They didn't ask questions. They just left. Clusters of neighbors drifted toward the parking lot, voices low, eyes avoiding mine. Trucks pulled out slowly, gravel crunching under tires like punctuation marks ending a sentence no one wanted to finish. I stood near the stage long after the speaker went silent. Dad was on his knees. Not metaphorically, actually on the wooden planks, palms pressed flat like the floor might answer him if he begged hard enough. "Rena," he said hoarsely, "please." That single word carried 32 years of authority, of expectations, of obedience, and it finally had no power left. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I didn't explain. I simply turned and walked away. That was my first real decision. Not revenge, not anger, detachment. The deputies arrived within 20 minutes. Mr. Lane coordinated calmly, as if this were just another Sunday filing, which, legally, it was. They collected documents from the office trailer, tagged the printer, copied hard drives. Mom had been led outside by a cousin, shaking so hard she couldn't hold her phone. Dad never followed. He stayed on the barn floor until the last cruiser pulled out. I didn't see him again that day. The next morning, I unlocked the office alone. For the first time since I was 12, the farm felt quiet, not peaceful, unanchored. I sat at my desk, staring at Grandpa's old receipt framed on the wall. His first sale, 50 birds, cash only. I whispered out loud, "I didn't burn it down." Because that mattered to me. I didn't destroy the farm. I protected it, even if that meant losing the people who built it with me. The legal fallout came fast. Within 48 hours, the trust injunction was public record. Banks froze accounts. Vendors were notified that only my authorization mattered. Dad's gambling creditors came knocking. They didn't find what they expected. The house, our childhood home, was leveraged to the edge. The equity gone, the land protected by the trust. Mom moved in with her sister temporarily. Dad slept in his truck for 3 nights before a friend from church let him crash on a couch. Lana disappeared completely. Phone disconnected, social media wiped. The golden boy who never planned beyond next semester suddenly had nowhere to land. People asked me how I felt. I didn't know how to answer. Because relief and grief don't cancel each other out. They coexist. 3 weeks later, the court hearing confirmed what Grandpa's will had stated all along. I was the sole beneficiary. The farm was never meant to be split. Dad had known that. Mom had signed it. Lana had joked about it for years. And still, they tried to take it. The judge didn't raise his voice when he ruled. He didn't need to. The consequences were clean. Assets liquidated to cover debts. Restitution ordered. Probation pending sentencing. No dramatics, just law. I made my second decision that day. I didn't attend the sentencing. I wasn't interested in watching people I once loved be reduced to defendants. That chapter had already ended for me. Running the farm alone felt different. Not harder, clearer. I hired a professional operations manager through the co-op, someone with no history, no guilt, no entitlement. We rewrote protocols, separated finances, implemented audits. I approved bonuses tied to performance, not loyalty. Employees stayed late, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Trust, I learned, isn't inherited. It's earned daily. 6 months later, revenue climbed 25%. Direct-to-consumer sales exploded once we launched nationwide shipping. The smoker lines expanded. Orders came in from states I'd never visited. I watched the numbers grow without fear, because they were clean. No secrets, no hidden transfers, no late-night whispers through baby monitors. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the silence. Holidays came and went without calls. Mom sent one letter, 3 sentences. I hope you're well. I'm working at the diner now. I understand why you did what you did. I read it once, then filed it away. Understanding doesn't undo damage. One evening, months later, I stood on the porch watching the flock settle for the night. The sky was streaked orange and purple, the kind of sunset Grandpa used to stop and appreciate, no matter how busy we were. I realized something then. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. That was my third decision. To stop defining my life by what I survived and start building what I deserved. The first Christmas after everything fell apart was the quietest one of my life. No chaos in the kitchen, no overlapping conversations, no forced smiles around a table pretending nothing was wrong. Just me. And for the first time, that didn't feel like failure. I woke up before dawn out of habit, pulled on my boots, and walked the barns while frost still clung to the doors. The turkeys rustled softly, settling as I passed. Heat lamps glowed steady. Feed bins were full. The farm was calm, not tense, not holding its breath. Calm. I brewed coffee and drank it on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky lighten. Somewhere down the road, church bells rang. I didn't go. I didn't feel guilty about that anymore, because guilt had been my leash for years. People like to say forgiveness sets you free. What they don't tell you is that boundaries do too. And sometimes, boundaries are the only reason forgiveness is even possible later. In January, I filed paperwork to restructure the farm as a woman-owned agricultural business. Not for optics, for protection. I separated my personal finances completely, hired an external CPA, scheduled quarterly audits. Every decision had documentation now. No more trust me. No more we're family. Just clarity. And clarity felt like oxygen. I started therapy in February, not because I was broken, but because I was tired of carrying things alone. My therapist asked me one question that stayed with me. When did you learn that love meant obligation? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I'd never known another version. Spring came early that year. Green shoots pushed through fields that had survived drought, storms, and neglect. I took that as a sign, not in a mystical way, but in a practical one. Resilience isn't dramatic. It's quiet, persistent, unimpressed by excuses. The farm hosted its first controlled community event in April. Smaller, transparent, accountable. No speeches, no hero stories, just good food, fair wages, and people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they owed us anything. I noticed something then. The people who stayed were different, healthier. One afternoon, a young woman approached me near the smoker line. She worked 2 jobs, helped her parents pay rent, had been told her whole life she was responsible for everyone else. She looked at me and said, "Watching you." It made me realize I don't have to bleed to prove I love them. I didn't give her advice. I just nodded. Because sometimes recognition is enough. By summer, I stopped waiting for apology texts that never came. Stopped checking the road for familiar trucks. Stopped imagining conversations where things were different. Grief, I learned, isn't linear, but neither is healing. I redecorated the house slowly, nothing dramatic, just small choices made for me. Different curtains, a reading chair by the window, music playing without worrying who it annoyed. The space became mine, and so did my time. On my 33rd birthday, I took the day off. That alone felt revolutionary. I drove to the coast, ate seafood by myself, and watched the tide roll in and out without needing to manage anything. I didn't feel lonely. I felt present. Here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. Being the strong one is not a life sentence. It's a role, and roles can be resigned. If you're a woman watching this who feels exhausted, overlooked, or quietly used, if your worth only seems visible when you're fixing, paying, or holding things together, I need you to hear this. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for enforcing boundaries. And you are not disloyal for refusing to be exploited, even by family, especially by family. The farm is thriving now, but more importantly, I am. Not because I won, but because I stopped losing myself. I still walk the barns at sunrise, still check the thermostats, still work hard. But now, when I lock the office door at night, I do it with peace. Because everything inside, the land, the business, the future, belongs to someone who protects it. Me. And if you're rebuilding after betrayal, remember this. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they were there at the beginning. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is continue without them.